why not train the blacks how to act rather than
what you're saying right now is illegal.
Rather than putting the responsibility on the owner of the company?
No, that's what you just said is illegal.
Why is that?
You cannot train the blacks.
Why not? I'm not talking about the company training them. Why don't your job, why don't you switch your role rather than putting that responsibility on the companies? Why not train the blacks how to work, how to act at work? What is exclusion and what is microaggression?
So the microaggression is any act or word or deed, behavior that makes someone feel like they are otherized, like they are being pushed to the outside, like they don't belong, like they're curiosity. And the purpose of the book, in part, was to rebrand the term microaggression to subtle act of exclusion. Microaggression has the word aggression built into it, and it puts people on the defensive, and there's really nothing micro about it. If it's you who's on the receiving end of it, it can feel enormous, and it can feel, very, very insulting and belittling.
Whose fault is it if a person is so weak they can be made to feel that way?
It's not always a matter of fault, because it is, I write mostly in the context of the workplace, right? So as an employer, any given employer has a responsibility to ensure the safety, psychological and physical, of the people who work within the workplace. So if every time I show up at a meeting as a female identified person, people talk over me, they disrespect the comments that I make, they assume that I'm going to take the notes because, I was assigned female at birth, they're constantly marginalizing me and putting me in a place that is less than their own status as men, for instance. So in the context of a workplace, these microaggressions or subtle acts of exclusion can have real world consequences and prevent people from being promoted and from having opportunities to really excel in their careers.
Well, let's say men and women are in a meeting, and we all know that men are stronger than women. Women are going to feel insecure anyway. How should the man deal with that insecure woman?
I will not agree with you and say that we know that men are stronger than women. My three ex-husbands would be evidence to the contrary. So I can tell you that society at large might share that narrative and promote that narrative. So what happens is you do get that gender minorities, women, non-binary people might inadvertently or intentionally play into a narrative that places us in that position. First of all, we look at bias not only at the individual level, but we look at it at the institutional level. So we want to make sure that our companies don't have systems, structures, and processes in place that support that kind of gender bias or any other kind of bias. So we have to check our leaders, we have to check our hiring managers, and make sure that the first thing that they're privileging is someone's qualification to do the job. And they're being assigned tasks based on their ability to do the task at hand, and it makes sure that it has nothing to do with their gender or gender assignment.
If I hire someone that took or acted that way, I can't babysit them. I'll just let them go. Because these are adults we are talking about, and when I hire someone, I'm not going to be their mama. I'm not going to, of course I want respect in the business, I want order. So you had 3 husbands?
I did.
And did you destroy them?
I did not destroy them. I gave them, I left them better than I found them.
Were they
but
weak?
They could not handle the strength that was me.
Oh.
We were not compatible in that way. In their mind, they might have assumed that women were submissive or were weaker, and that is certainly not the case with me.
What is it about you they could not handle?
It was different in each case, but I would say that as people evolve, like you might find somebody in one place. For me, one of the definitions of love is to embrace someone with so much grace and compassion that you want to grow along with them, alongside them, but you allow them the freedom to grow into the person who they are meant to be. higher power, spirit, God, whatever you want to call it, put me here on a mission to help heal and liberate hearts and minds all over the world. And so my light cannot be hidden under a bushel and shown only on one person who wants to keep that for them. I have to be in the world, professing my testimony, doing what I do, sharing my inspiration and insight, because that's what I'm here to do.
So you're into understanding microaggression. Were you microaggressive with these men? I have said to men for a long time now that if they want to get married and start a family, they should not marry an educated woman, because an educated woman act like a man. She thinks she is a man, and she doesn't want to be home, be the wife and the mother to his children. You also are a diversity, equity, and inclusion leader. Can you explain to me what is that and how does that work?
Yeah, so that means that, again, my focus, my learning laboratory is the workplace. So I roll into organizations and I ensure that Black people, that people of color, that women, that gender minorities, that sexual minorities, that people with disabilities are being treated respectfully and appropriately and fairly within the context of the workplace. When people are actually keen on hiring folks from these demographics, because that's the first hurdle, a lot of organizations don't have any of these folks represented. If they actually do hire folks from underrepresented demographics, a lot of people will hire and then tokenize, hire and then tell them to go sit down and shut up. We got you for the picture on the annual report. We got you for the picture on the website. Now don't contribute. And those microaggressions are not at all insignificant. So my job is to go in and I quantify, like I do metrics. And my company is the only company that can actually quantify diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then create a metrics-based accountability system for making sure that we close the gap, because Black people in companies all across this country and all around the world are often having a very different experience from white people in companies. And even if you just look at the organizational chart, you often have the most diversity at the bottom of the pyramid, and the higher up you go, the more white and the more male the organization becomes. That fact limits the ability of Black men and women and Hispanic men and women and queer men and women to have the opportunity to be successful, to thrive, to feed their families, and to live into their best lives. So my job is to knock down those barriers and make sure that people are having an equitable experience.
Amazing. I know truckloads of businessmen and women, but mostly men around the country, that they don't like hiring Black people because the Blacks are so much trouble. They are always complaining. They show up late. They think that everything is racism anytime you have to correct them. And so a lot of companies don't like hiring the Blacks. And they also are concerned that when they let them go, they're going to be sued for being called racist, right? Because the Blacks think everything is racist. So if you don't correct the Blacks, why would anybody want to be bothered with them?
So ascribing those particular attributes to Black people only is super problematic, because you get people of all races in organizations who complain, who show up late, who don't do their job, who sue you when you mistreat them. So those are not characteristics of Black people.
But it's well and alive in the Black folks, though.
Well, it is well and alive in all folks. That is well and alive in all folks. Listen, I'm an organizational development specialist. I have a doctorate of management in organizational development. I'm in organizations all over the world, and I can tell you that statistically speaking, all over the world, those are management issues that show up in all races, in all genders, and in all sexual orientations. What you're describing is the conscious bias of ostensibly white people you're talking about, who don't know how to communicate with, lead, manage, manage or interact with Black people across differences and inspire the kind of behavior that they're looking for. You've got to actually create a culture of intention and decide how you want people to feel and experience their day-to-day work life. And if you can't create that sense of belonging, that sense of engagement, that sense of inspiration, then you are every bit as much culpable for how people are showing up in the workplace.
Well, why not train the Blacks how to act rather than
what you're saying right now is illegal.
Rather than putting the responsibility on the owner of the company?
No, that's what you just said is illegal.
Why is that?
You cannot train the Blacks.
Why not?
That's not, if you are offering training, you have to train everyone. You can't make assignments by race like that.
I'm not talking about the company training them. Why don't your job, want to switch your role rather than putting that responsibility on the companies? Why not train the Blacks how to work, how to act at work?
That is an absurd notion.
Oh, why? It's hard to train them?